We are on the record for hearings in the matters listed in the North Dakota Industrial Commission hearing docket for April 25th. I am David Garner, hearing examiner for these hearings. We are at the hearing room for the Department of Mineral Resources, Oil and Gas Division, and it is 9 a.m. We have only two cases today, which we will consolidate for the purposes of hearing, and I'll move right to them. Case number 31623, petition of Cobra Oil and Gas Corp. For an order providing for the unitized management operation and further development of the Blue Moose Duperow unit area consisting of lands within the Blue Moose Field, McKenzie County, North Dakota, for approval of the unit agreement and unit operating agreement constituting the plan of unitization for the Blue Moose Duperow unit area, for approval of the plan of operation, vacating the applicable spacing orders, and for such further and additional relief. And also case number 31624, application of Cobra Oil and Gas Corp. In order of the Commission determining that the plan of unitization for the Blue Moose Duperow unit area, McKenzie County, North Dakota, has been signed, ratified, or approved by owners of interest owning that percentage of the working interest and royalty interest within said unit as is required by applicable statutes and rules of the Commission. All interested parties, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Examiner. Lawrence Bender, P.O. Box 1855, Bismarck, North Dakota, appearing in this matter, case 31623, on behalf of Cobra Oil and Gas Corporation. Mr. Examiner, at this time, we'd respectfully request that case number 31623 and 31624 be combined and consolidated for purposes of hearing. We're going to have three witnesses in case 31623 and possibly one witness in 31624.
Your request is granted. Mr. Hatley?
Yes, sir.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
Before I do my direct examination of Mr. Hatley, I'd like to point out to the Commission staff that what you have in front of you this morning is a packet of exhibits with the spiral binder for case 31623. Those are the documents that were filed with the Commission as part of the application. In addition to that, we have another packet of documents entitled Supplemental Exhibits for case numbers 31623. If I could spend a moment to explain, this is, although it's a very small unit, it's been complicated in the sense that the federal government has some lands in here. And we had provided the federal government with copies of the unit agreement, unit operating agreement very early on in the process. But as the process progressed, the federal government had some proposed changes. One of them was leaving a tract out that we had included. In addition to that, some of these lands were already spaced and division orders had been completed on them, but there was riverbed acreage, and the federal government had made some determination that the riverbed acreage had changed. So as a result of that, we had to go back in and make those changes. As you know, without the federal government on board on this, we cannot go forward with the unit. The state of North Dakota does not have compulsory unitization power over the federal government. So what we've done in an attempt to try to make this clear in our presentation this morning, we'll have the witnesses go through the large pack of exhibits that have been pre-filed, but where there has been some changes in the packet of exhibits that we have filed with the Commission, we're going to refer to the supplemental exhibits and hopefully do it in order so that the Commission can follow along. So with that in mind, we would call Seth Hatley as our first witness.
I just sworn it.
Okay, great, yeah. Seth, would you state your full name for the record, please?
Seth Hatt,
And Seth, by whom are you employed?
Cobra Oil and Gas Corporation.
And in what capacity?
I'm a senior landman.
And in that capacity, Seth, have you had an opportunity to testify before the Commission on previous occasions and have your qualifications accepted as that of an expert?
Yes, I have.
Offer the further testimony of this witness as that of an expert.
Motion granted.
Now, Seth, I don't believe you have the exact, I mean, the exhibits are exact, but they're not bound the same way. I'm going to direct your attention to the set of exhibits that was initially filed with the Commission 45 or 50 days ago. It's a larger packet of exhibits, and so I'm going to direct your attention to that. And what I'd like you to do is first go to what's been marked as Exhibit 1. And what I'd like you to do with that exhibit is first identify it, tell us what it is, and then secondly, just tell us what's contained on it very briefly.
Sure. Exhibit 1 here is the area locator map indicating Cobra's Bull Moose Field and the surrounding field in McKenzie County.
Okay, and then let's go to exhibit number 2. Can you tell me what exhibit number 2 is and also describe what's contained upon it?
Sure. Exhibit 2 is a larger scale locator map depicting the Bull Moose Field in McKenzie County and surrounding fields in here.
And it's going to show some of the existing wells in this proposed unit area, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Let's go then to Exhibit 3, and this is one of the exhibits I was referring to that there's been some changes made. So first, just very briefly identify Exhibit 3 in the packet that was pre-filed with the commission, and then also refer to Exhibit 3 in the supplemental exhibits.
Sure. Exhibit 3 here is a track map outlining Cobra's proposed Bull Moose Super unit. As Lawrence mentioned, the supplemental map there, you'll notice the northeast quarter of Section 15 has been omitted based on our conversation with the BLM.
Okay, so what happened there, just as a little bit more explanation, Seth, is basically the request to the federal government initially was tracked outlines as proposed on your pre-filed Exhibit 3, and the Bureau of Land Management came back and said, please remove the northeast quarter of 15 and go forward with the unit without that particular tract. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, then let's go to Exhibit 4, and that's a multi-page exhibit. And is this a unit agreement that is required by the federal government if you have federal lands in the proposed unit?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and let's go to page 2 of the unit agreement, and then also go to page Exhibit 4 of the supplemental exhibits, page 2, and perhaps you could just outline the change there, which is going to become obvious as a result of your testimony on the previous exhibit.
Sure. Our unit area was initially proposed at 640 acres, and that has been amended there to reflect 480 acres within the contained unit area,
And
as depicted in the supplement.
yeah, I'm sorry I interrupted you, Seth, but
No.
and then as you've testified previously, this is a form that the Bureau of Land Management requires for unitization of federal lands. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And another change is if we go to Exhibit A and then go to supplemental Exhibit A in the packet, can you explain what's been changed there?
Let me. Here. Okay, yes, sorry about that.
You're
Exhibit
fine.
A, I have the supplemental, I'm looking back at the original, sorry about that.
Do you remember my question, or?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the supplemental, I'm trying to track down the original. Okay, I've got it here, sorry about that.
You're fine.
Exhibit A is our Bull Moose unit area outline depicting the gross acreage and acreage percentage. Originally, the federal land covered 154.14 acres. The fee land covered 485.86 acres, grossing 640 acres. And the federal land consisted of 24.284%, and the fee lands initially constituted 75.916%. And that has been updated and supplemented based on our conversations with the BLM. Moving forward, the gross area acreage will consist of 480 acres. Federal land will consist of 154.14 acres, and the fee land will make up 325.86 acres. Federal land will equal 32.1125% of that, and the fee land will make up the remainder of 57.8875%.
Okay. And once again, this is a change. The change in Exhibit A to supplemental Exhibit A is a result, again, of the federal government requesting that a 160-acre tract be removed from the unit outline. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. Let's then go to Exhibit B in the pre-filed exhibits, and perhaps just compare that again to supplemental Exhibit B and explain what's going on there.
Sure. Exhibit B is our schedule showing ownership of all oil and gas interests within the proposed unit, and it's broken out into tracts there. It's broken out into tracts, lease rates, mineral interests, lease recording information, and the percentages based on a tract factor.
Okay. And as I understand it, there was a change, and you may have to go into a little bit of detail because this is an unusual situation, but Tract 5, perhaps you can explain what the status of those lands were in Tract 5 when this application was filed, and now the status of those lands since the filing.
Sure. Tract 5, our Bull Moose 1123 well was producing marginally. We deemed, based on our conversations with Burlington and ConocoPhillips, that lease was no longer paying in producing quantities. We have since agreed to a new lease with new terms, and that new royalty rate should reflect 20%.
Okay. And that the original lease that has now expired, that was an unusual lease, was it not, in that there was no royalty interest?
That is correct. This was subject to an old Pennzoil Burlington agreement back in the 70s. Essentially, they were drilling on their own minerals, and there was a zero royalty rate lease covering this particular tract.
And ConocoPhillips wasn't as generous as they were on that first lease. There's a royalty rate on this one, is that correct?
That is correct.
And what is that royalty rate?
That new updated royalty rate is 20%.
Okay. All right, and then let's go to the unit operating agreement. Once again, is this what we might refer to as a standard unit operating agreement that the commission has seen many times in other requests for unitization of various pools in North Dakota?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and perhaps it might be useful, Seth, if you could just very briefly go through some of the exhibits. We've already talked about exhibits A and B, and I think C is pretty straightforward. Maybe you could just touch on what exhibits D through, I believe, is it F or G, H? If you
Yes,
could just go through
I
those
believe
exhibits.
Sure. Exhibit D is our schedule of working interest. The first Exhibit D here reflects the working interest on a tract basis. So you'll see each tract working interest along with the Phase 1 tract participation factor and the Phase 2 tract participation factors.
Okay. And what's the second page of Exhibit D?
Yes, that is more of the same. This is a unit-based schedule of working interest on a unit basis. You'll see Cobra will own 98.374550% of Phase 1 unit participation, and Whiting Oil and Gas Corporation will own the remainder, 1.62545%. Phase 2 unit participation, Cobra have a 99.18720%, and Whiting will make up the remainder, 0.812800%.
Okay. And at this point in time, and, this is probably more appropriately addressed in the ratification portion, but we can touch on it here. At this point in time, Whiting has not executed a ratification, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, just very quickly, Exhibit E, can you tell us what that is?
Exhibit E is our accounting procedures.
Okay, and Exhibit F?
Okay, well, within Exhibit E is our standard COPA for accounting purposes. Exhibit F. Hold on one second. Bear with me here. Apologize. Okay, Exhibit F is our insurance provision.
Exhibit G?
Exhibit G is our inventory and price.
Okay. I believe that's the only exhibits that are attached to the unit operating agreement, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And as far as you know, those are relatively standard in nature as well?
Yes, that is correct.
Mr. Examiner, no further questions to the land witness.
Any questions from staff?
Bear with me for a minute. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and I think I might need to start with you, Lawrence. Earlier, when the commission began reviewing the original packet, I had reached out and asked for some supplemental digital filings of some of the exhibits, and at that time, that packet that was provided, which is in the case file, appears to have incorporated a number of the changes that you're now presenting on your supplemental exhibits. Are you aware, do they 100%, or are you relatively certain that the information I was provided at that time is what's being provided in all the supplementals?
If you can refresh my memory, were those exhibits that we provided you as a result of your request, were they geologic exhibits?
They were geologic, but they also included updates to, it didn't have the unit agreement, so that change wasn't there, but it was recognized that the Exhibit A had been changed, so that 40 acres, that tract that was cut out wasn't represented in the new exhibits, and the 13A and B were updated, it looks like, and they appear to be the same as what's in this supplemental packet.
I think we better rely on the supplemental exhibits that we submitted today, because we've gone through and there was a little bit of confusion when the federal government asked us to make some changes. We made a change to one exhibit, for example, like 13A and 13B have some relationship to some of the other exhibits that are part of the unit operating agreement. So I think it's probably best that you rely on what we present you here today.
Okay, so there's a chance that, at this point, there's a chance that we haven't had a chance to review this supplemental packet in detail.
I think you probably have, but to be 100% certain, I think we should need to rely on the exhibits we're presenting here today. And I apologize for the confusion, but I just absolutely wanted to get you today what was correct.
Right. With that in mind, I mean, our notes and at least my notes and my evaluation were based on the information we had up until today. So if there's discrepancies there, or I go down roads and asking questions about things that have been changed, you'll have to point them out, or we might need to follow up after the hearing as needed to make sure they're clear on things.
Yeah, and once again, I think all those changes that may have been submitted previously versus what's here today, I think that's going to be in the engineering section, and Dre should be able to respond to your questions. I don't mean to put Dre on the spot, but if he can't, then we can always supplement.
At a quick glance, it appears that what I had was what's here, but I haven't gone through it in detail.
And it'll be a little bit before Dre is called, so Chip, if I can send a message to Dre here. Dre, if you want to take a look at what we not pre-filed, but supplemented a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
that might be useful to answer Rich's question about whether the exhibits we submitted yesterday match what we sent a few weeks ago.
It was what was provided April 9th.
April 9th.
Or sorry.
Did you catch
yeah,
that,
April
Dre?
9th.
Yes, this is Dre speaking. I think the only thing that's going to change is the original place off the
He
Q
can
map.
address it
Yeah.
when he comes up.
Yeah, we can address that when you testify, Dre. Thank you.
Okay. With that, I'm going to go ask a couple more questions, and I think it still ends up, it's either Seth or Lawrence if you need to answer, but it was already pointed out this is based on the unit agreement and unit operator agreement are based on the federal versions of the form.
Yeah, and let me clarify that. The federal government really doesn't have a federal form of unit operating agreement, but I do. And so what I typically do is if I use a federal form, I have a form that I typically use with that federal form of a unit operating agreement. So that's what I've done here. And so internally I refer to that as a federal unit operating agreement form.
Okay. Then throughout the unit agreement, I'll start with page 2 of the unit agreement, Article 3, where it's talking expansion of the unit area. The language is there for the federal side of the need for the federal entities to approve any changes to the unit area, but there's no discussion of the state also having to approve an expansion to the unit area. This is a common theme throughout the packet. I'm sure we've accepted versions of this packet before, but it was just more glaringly obviously that throughout this there was a bunch of spots, unit expansion, Article 7, the resignation or removal of unit operator, requiring the AO or the secretary approvals. There's a whole bunch of spots throughout the form where it clearly references the federal side of it, but the state would have a position where we would also need to approve those changes, and we're not referenced that need would be, that they would have to get state approval also. I'm wondering if we shouldn't have your office go through this and make some of those additions where our statutes would require the state to approve something like the expansions and also include that would be needed in the unit agreement.
If the commission does that, that is for certain going to result in the federal government not approving the unit agreement. As you know, I've done a number of unitizations in my career, and of those, a number of them have been federal forms. And what I do now is I take the federal form and I make the changes that I absolutely have to, which is the acreage, the unit operator, that sort of thing, and they will not approve anything beyond that. My suggestion to solve the problem that the commission has, and I'm not suggesting it's not a problem, but I would just say that I think the commission can solve that by saying that in addition to all the approvals that are required in the unit operating agreement, the federal form of the unit operating agreement, the operator must also seek the approval of the industrial commission. And I
just
think that will solve it.
Include that in the
In the
order.
order, yes.
We'll discuss and determine what
Yeah,
best course
and
is.
if it's helpful for the commission, I'm happy to, review a typical order and make a suggestion on where I think it should be put in, so that, I think that's probably a given anyway, that we can't change it unless the state of North Dakota agrees, but I have no problem whatsoever putting that in the order. Putting it into the unit agreement will, in essence, end this project with the federal government.
Okay, but again, we'll consider and determine what the appropriate course is there. Let me see if I have anything else in this section. I think that's all I've got in.
If I can just maybe say one thing, it may be helpful for the commission if I can find another situation where there's been a federal unit, it's been approved by the commission, a federal form was used, and maybe I can find some language in that order of the commission, and perhaps you'll feel more comfortable if you've done it before.
Yeah, I'm sure we've accepted similar, without those same clauses, it just
Yep.
became more glaringly obvious when I was
Yeah.
reading through it that there was stuff missing there.
Yeah.
I got something. Hey, Seth, on your exhibit A, kind of just gives your gross acreage percentage broken out, if you remember that
Yes.
one.
Yes.
Section 14 isn't shown on the exhibit itself, but do you know if there's any federal acreage in that section at all?
I could certainly look into that really quickly. I don't have my notes in front of me, but I can let you know.
And you're interested in knowing there's federal acreage in there regardless of whether it's part of the unit?
Just the adjacent section, yeah.
Yeah, just because.
I have a map at my office.
Well, let's do this, Seth, so we don't slow the process down. Perhaps when Josh is testifying, you could go grab those materials and then come back. We can ask that question again if that works for you.
Yes, I can dig into that.
Okay.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, Seth.
Sorry, I did have one other thing on Exhibit A as well. And again, it's slightly different than what you're presenting today than previously, but the Tract 2 and Tract 4, looking at the supplemental Exhibit 3, Tract 4, I'm assuming, is there's a vertical line missing between Tract 4 and Tract 5. There's no lines separating Tract 1, 3, and 5 on this exhibit in the supplemental. It's all yellow highlight.
Right.
And so there's supposed to be a line at the quarter section boundaries, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so Tract 4 is just that little sliver, and at the bottom of, I remember what section it's in based on what I'm looking at here, 22. But those two slivers, Tract 2 and Tract 4, can you give me a little information as far as what separates those two?
Yes, there are some discrepancies throughout this area. This is based on the BLM's most recent survey shot, and it has to do with the ebbs and flows of the Little Missouri River there, and where the base, the banks of that river have been historically, where they are now, and what the most recent banks are represented as far as the BLM is concerned. And this is based on their most recent survey.
And Rich, were you looking at the Exhibit A supplemental? Were you looking at Exhibit A in the pre-filed packet?
Supplemental Exhibit 3,
Oh,
which I think was,
I'm sorry.
oh, never mind. So supplemental Exhibit 3, which was Exhibit 3, I guess, it wasn't Exhibit A, doesn't have the lines separating the tracks.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to confirm that that's where those are supposed to be. But then the question is the same regarding what Tract 2 versus 4 and what defines them.
I think the answer to that question is in the Exhibit B that's attached. That breaks up the tracks, so. if-
Is that clear in B?
I didn't hear you, so.
So I guess there is one more question then on Exhibit A, specifically Exhibit A. The way that plat is identified there, it's got a double line around what looks like the river bed as well as the federal acreage in Tract 1. I'm assuming that's just a double line and it should be a single line ultimately. There's no extra space in between there.
Yes, that is correct. It's really hard to capture in this type of map, but we wanted to identify the river as best we could. And this was also based on the BLM information they provided us when we initially spoke. So this is up to date as of 6 months ago.
Okay. I just needed to confirm that we didn't have an unaccounted for portion of land in a white space that wasn't labeled with a number, so.
And no, it should just be aligned, but in order to capture, where the river actually crosses it, it's kind of difficult to show in this particular case.
Okay. I think that's everything. Thank you.
Lawrence, I have a few questions probably for you and probably a few for Seth. In the unit agreement, Article 2, unit area, in
What
this.
page are you?
Page 2, this, unit area, Article 2. The very last, the second last sentence, I'll read starting from the right, it says authorized officer hereinafter referred to as the AO or by the board. What is the board referring to?
First, I'm having trouble finding where you're talking about.
So it's the very last, it's the second to last line in,
Oh, where it says authorized officer hereinafter referred to as the AO or by the board.
is the board supposed to refer to the commission?
When Rich was asking me questions about the fact that this didn't seem to address the commission, I actually thought there was, but it does say any enlargement of the unit area shall require approval of the AO and shall be in accordance with the provisions of the North Dakota state statutes. But I don't remember if in here any place they define what board is.
Oftentimes different state regulatory agencies are referred to as boards or commissions. I was just wondering if that was just,
Yeah, and now that you mention that, as I recall when I was making the changes to the federal form, this did say at one point in time that it had to be put together in accordance with Montana statutes. And I believe you'd probably know better than I, but I believe the entity in Montana is referred to as the Montana Board of Oil and Gas.
it is.
So it may very well should have referred to the commission. And I don't think they would, I don't think the federal government would have a problem if we were to change that. So that is something, if you desire it to be changed, we could maybe put in the North Dakota Industrial Commission and then put in defined terms commission. So I think you're probably right.
And then, as you alluded to, the next article, expansion of unit area, as Rich pointed out, it refers to the AO quite often in here.
Yep.
But it seems to be a catch-all there, and shall be in accordance with the provisions of North Dakota state statutes, which would say you have to follow state statutes.
Yep.
Which would require approval of the commission for enlargement, expansion, anything like that. Okay, Article 5 on page 3, tractor qualified for participation. So in the middle of that paragraph at the bottom of page 3, so it would be the second sentence, it says, on or after the effective date hereof, the tracts within the unit area, in the absence of an involuntary pooling order issued by the NDIC, so keep that in mind. So then our 5A, B, and C, are they in effect if the commission has not involuntarily pooled this acreage?
No, if the industrial commission issues an order establishing a unit and rules that a sufficient number of royalty owners and working interest owners have ratified the unit, basically everything in A, B, and C is superfluous.
That's kind of what I meant.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, I think Yeah, I was just clarifying, so I wasn't trying to correct you.
And then Article 7 on page 5, the third paragraph says the unit operating may, upon default or failure in the performance of its duties or obligations hereunder, be subject to removal by the same percentage vote of the owners of working interest as herein provided for the selection of a new unit operator. Where is the herein provided at? I couldn't find it.
I think you'd probably, I'd have to go back and to be absolutely certain on that, but,
Does that refer back to the preamble? Where it talks about the percentages that are required to approve the unit?
I think that's one possibility, but to be 100% certain, I'd also have to take a look at where it says tracks qualified for participation. I don't know if there's a provision in there someplace that talks about dissolution.
Yeah, I couldn't find it.
Okay. But I think, you know, and in any event, as you pointed out a few moments ago, there's language in the first page or two of the unit agreement that talks about how it's subject to, and I'm paraphrasing, subject to state law. So it seems to me you could refer that back to that as being herein, and then you'd go to the state statutes to determine how it should be dissolved.
Okay. And then in Article 11, Plan of Operations, but on page 7, the second paragraph says the unit operator shall have the right to inject into the unitized formation any substances for enhanced recovery purposes in accordance with the plan of operation approved by the AO. So I think that would be another area where the order might point out that you have to get approval from the commission as to what you're going to inject into the, we may leave it broad, we have restricted it in some cases, but it seems to me that since the federal government cannot issue an injection permit, that it has to come from us.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, and once again, I mean, it refers back to the statute that says all of this has to be in accordance with state law.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be able to have an order from the Industrial Commission that gives the operator the right to inject water, only water, and then come along and say, oh, the AO has allowed us to inject CO2, and we don't really care what the state of North Dakota thinks. That's because there are fee lands in here in addition to federal lands. And even if there were just federal lands, I think the commission may take the position that they need to be involved in injecting of a different substance than set forth.
Yeah, North Dakota has primacy on injection in North Dakota, other than the reservation, but I think that's somewhat self-explanatory. Okay. And on page 12, Article 20, effective date, it refers to following the approval of this agreement by the secretary or his duly authorized delegate. Obviously, they would have to get commission approval before this unit would go forward.
Correct.
That's it for the unit agreement, and then I had a question. I'm a little bit confused. If I look at Exhibit A in the pre-filed, so the one that contains 640 acres, it has Tract 3 as the west half of Section 15. And this may be for Seth, but if you look at Exhibit B in the pre-filed, refers to Tract 3 as the southeast quarter of 15. So obviously you came here today and showed us that, oh yeah, the northeast quarter 15 was taken out of the unit, but it looks like it was already taken out in the pre-filed on this exhibit.
I don't know the answer, Seth. Do you, I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, but
No, I'm just trying to think back to the timeline of when we had our conversation with BLM and when everything was submitted. There's a chance that they were within the same we made the adjustments and sent them over without sending everything over. I'm trying to think back on the timeline here. That's probably what happened there.
So then my next question is Exhibit C,
C as in cat?
C as in cat, the track participation factors, are those based on the west half of 15 or the southeast, or excuse me, east half of 15 or the southeast of 15? Because if it was the east half, I would assume these participations would have to be adjusted.
I think that's a question that would be better addressed to Dre Parr.
Okay.
Because he has spent some time looking at Exhibit C, and I believe it's 13A and 13B that are utilized to come up with these numbers. But when we call Dre, we can specifically ask him to address that.
Okay.
I believe these were updated and sent over before everything else. This was brought to our attention yesterday that those were actually sent over earlier than the others. So there's a chance that that's why this was already set before we made our changes. But again, this does represent the southeast of Section 15.
Exhibit C does?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I assume someone's going to explain why the unit got shrunken down, that 160 acres?
I assume the federal government told Cobra why they didn't want that northeast quarter in there. I was not told, so, but
Okay.
maybe that's, I don't know if that's a question for you, Seth, or do we wait for Dre on that?
Well, I think Josh can also step in on that as well.
Yeah, I can
Okay.
answer that.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
so somebody is available to answer the question.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I did have one more thing in the unit agreement that I noted. Unit agreement, page 12, 22, the termination by working interest owners clause. The first paragraph there requires working interest owners owning 90% or more to potentially terminate. Why 90%? Why is that number different than the either, I guess, 80% that you see throughout tracks qualified for participation, or the 55% required for ratification?
I don't know the answer to that question, other than what I stated earlier. This is what the federal government wants, and if we want to get them on board to sign off on it, this is what we have to use. But I don't think it's necessarily that unusual to have a certain percentage for sign-up and then have a different percentage for termination. That's not terribly unusual. In North Dakota, it's probably a little bit unusual, more recently, but I think if you go back many years, when we were back at 80% sign-up, we may very well have had a situation where the termination was more than that. But it's been a long time, as you know, since we've been at 80%.
Again, I guess then the question would be, if the commission deems that we would consider something else for that, or it should be something else, would putting it in our order and establishing that be a major conflict?
I don't think it's going to make any difference, Mr. Suggs, because if we can't form this unit without the federal government's approval, and we're not going to be able to terminate it without the federal government's approval. So you can put 50%, 55%, 60%, and if the federal government says it takes 90, that's what it's going to take to terminate it. I mean, there's a provision in the U.S. Constitution referred to as the Supremacy Clause, and that means if there's a dispute between the federal law and the state law, and the federal law is constitutional, the federal law preempts the state law. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of authority or power the state of North Dakota has in unitization matters where the federal government has property.
Okay, thank you.
And Lawrence, I think we've discussed this in previous units, but there's no provision in here for the mineral interest owners to terminate the unit, but I assume that the state statute would, there's a state statute that discusses that, so I assume that would be in effect.
Yeah, and I think the way that process would work, Mr. Bohr, is if the royalty owners decided that they wanted the unit terminated, they would proceed under the provisions of the state statute. And if the state statute, if the industrial commission were to issue an order and say, yes, we believe it should be terminated, we'd then have to go back to the federal government to see if they would agree.
Sure, thank you.
Mr. Aaron,
Yes.
do you solemnly swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
Josh, would you state your name for the record, please?
Josh Aaron,
And Josh, by whom are you employed?
Oil and Gas Corporation,
In what capacity?
Williston Basin geologist.
And in that capacity, have you testified before the commission previously?
No, sir.
What I would like you to do, Josh, is briefly highlight for the examiner and the commission staff your educational background and work experience.
Okay, I can do that. I graduated from Midwestern State University in May of 2017 with my Bachelor's of Science in Geosciences. And in 2019, I graduated with my Master's of Science in Petroleum Geology from Midwestern State University, where I worked on a thesis. As far as my career is concerned, I broke out into oil and gas industry in 2017, working with MSB Operating in Archer County for 2 summers on a workover rig. In January of 2019 through 2020, I was employed by LMH Energy as an entry-level geologist, where I worked Archer County fields in North Texas as well as KMA fields on conventional prospects. And in January of 2020, I was hired by Cobra Oil and Gas Corporation, where I worked the conventional stacked reservoirs of the Williston Basin and conducted, field studies and volumetric estimates of conventional gas reservoirs.
And in preparation for today's hearings, have you made a thorough study and review of all the relevant geologic matters concerning this unitization matter?
Yes, sir.
And have you prepared or had prepared under your control and supervision some exhibits you intend to sponsor?
Yes, sir.
Have you satisfied yourself as to the accuracy of those exhibits?
Yes, sir.
Offer the further testimony of this witness, that of an expert.
Motion granted.
Okay, Josh, let's go back to the packet of exhibits. Seth took us through 3 exhibits as well as the unit agreement, unit operating agreement, and some exhibits attached to those 2 documents. I believe the first geologic exhibit is Exhibit 6. So what I'd like you to do is go to Exhibit 6 and identify Exhibit 6 and then briefly highlight what's contained upon it. And perhaps I should, you can answer this question if you would, please. We did in the supplemental packet of exhibits have some geologic exhibits. Perhaps you can explain.
Quality. So we attached the more clear and precise exhibits within the supplemental package just for visual purposes.
And we've also filed with the commission, have we not, PDFs so that the commission can get a more detailed look if they like?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, with that, let's go to Exhibit 6 and briefly discuss what's contained on it.
Okay, so in Exhibit 6, we're looking at a type log of the Bull Moose 115. The Bull Moose 115 is located in the southwest quarter, the southeast quarter of Section 15 in Township 147 North, Range 101 West of McKenzie County, North Dakota. The type log encompasses the stratigraphic interval from the top of the Devonian Age Dupro Formation at a measured depth of 10.898 to the base of the Dupro, also known as the Devonian Age Sourish River, at a measured depth of 11,273. The highlighted intervals here are shown in the type log that are in purple or the magenta color, are going to be the producing intervals within the bull moose field. Shown on the type log within the depth track are these magenta boxes or pink boxes. Those are indicating perforations within that well, and these zones are pretty homogeneous throughout the reservoir in bull moose field, and typically are perforated in almost every well.
And Josh, if I look at your Exhibit 6, you have labeled off to the right-hand side what you describe as the unitized formation. As you know, the unit agreement has a definition of the unitized formation. How does the definition as described in the unit agreement compare to what you have depicted as the unitized formation on Exhibit 6?
I would say this was accurate.
All right, let's go to the next exhibit in the packet, Exhibit 7. As you did with Exhibit 6.
I'd like to note on the previous question on why was Section 15 shrunk down before I get into the nitty-gritty of what we're looking at here, but Section 15 was confined to the southeast border due to well control being absent within the northeast border. Initially, we had incorporated the northeast border based upon our Madison structure map, and how typically, your Madison structure is going to replicate what the formations look like within the subsurface deeper than the Madison. So with that being said, we kind of inferred that there was potentially the reservoir was extending through the northeast quarter of Section 15. However, the federal government decided to omit that due to the well control. But moving on to the structure map and kind of going through what's outlined here. The blue outline is just depicting the proposed bull moose Dupro unit, and as you can see, there's a cross-section line A to A prime that's in a southwest to northeast orientation. The contour interval shown on this map is 20 feet. However, within the proposed unit, there are dashed lines which aren't depicted very well within the supplemental package, but if you refer to the PDS, you'll be able to see that more clearly. And those dashed lines are going to indicate 10-foot contour intervals, just so you kind of get a more defined outline of the structure itself. The Dupro structure is confined by the bold contour line seen within the proposed Dupro unit, and that contour line is at 8,860 feet subsea. This is on a north-south local trend, and possibly resulting from being situated within an abatement during the time of deposition. Differential compaction and dissolution of the salts created the observed anticlinal synclinal structure, and based upon this, the features represent a shoaling sequence, which is the same depositional environment observed within the Mission Canyon. Productive intervals within this Dupro unit are going to be the Dupro A1, Dupro A2, and Dupro C1, which were highlighted on the type log. And these intervals are laterally homogeneous beds that truncate outside of the productive limit of the bold contour line 8860 subsea. And this is primarily due to porosity and permeability restrictions. The call-out boxes seen on the structure map are going to indicate non-productive or wet test within the Dupro, which which this is going to be indication of why the structure was confined the way it was, due to the surrounding wells that were non-productive or in fact tested wet.
And Josh, I believe you indicated that supplemental Exhibit 7 was submitted so that we'd have a clear depiction of the structure in this area. In addition to that, when you were putting that together, you discovered that your line of cross-section had inadvertently been omitted from Exhibit 7, so you added that on supplemental Exhibit 7 as well, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's go then to the next exhibit, Exhibit 8, and can you tell us what that is?
So Exhibit 8 is going to be the cross-section shown within the Exhibit 7 structure map from 8A prime. The correlated intervals here are going to be starting from the base, are going to be the Dupro-Sourish River. That's going to be the base of the unitized formation. The Dupro D is used for a gamma marker. Dupro C1 is going to be the productive interval that is perforated throughout the field. Dupro A2 and Dupro A1 follow suit with the C1 being the productive intervals. Dupro A was used for gamma ray marker as well, and then moving on to the top of the Dupro, you see the top of the Dupro formation there that is correlated across these 5 wells. Starting with the first well, the 2212F was perforated in all 3 of the intervals, the Dupro A1, A2, and C1, and they all tested wet based upon findings within the well files. Moving on to the next well, the 22X32F. Prior to plugging this well, the well was averaging 54 barrels a day and 83% oil cut with significant increase in production rate, seen within the addition of the Dupro A1 perf in 1994. That perforation was added post Dupro A2 and C1. The 2232F, that well had collapsed casing and was plugged, which led to canceling of the Dupro, testing the Dupro and recompletion. Before plugging this well, it produced from the Red River, the Bird Bear, or the Nisku, and the Madison. However, there was a DST ran through this wellbore, and it did recover 3,799 feet of flowing gas, and within the sample chamber, we saw 280 cc's of oil and 1,700 cc's of water. However, the neighboring well there, the 22Y32, that was drilled by Sequel Energy, and it was targeting Red River reserves. However, it was plugged back to produce the Dupro A2 and C1 intervals. While no open hole logs were found for this wellbore, given the significant SOPH values and production from the Dupro A1 and the Bull Moose 22X32F, production within the Dupro A1 could yield significant volumes and recoverable hydrocarbons left behind after the collapsed casing of the 22X32F. Cobra successfully completed the Dupro A1 and the 22Y32 in 2022, and prior to recompletion of the Dupro A1, the A2 and C1 produced 37,000 barrels of oil. The Bull Moose 115 is completed in all 3 intervals, and the Bull Moose 1123 is completed in the Dupro C1, and then it was recompleted in the A1 as well. The Federal 1414, the last well in the cross-section of 8A prime on the north, would be the furthest northeast well there. That had all 3, or the Dupro C1 was perforated and tested wet with 85% water cut.
All right, let's go on to the next exhibit then, Exhibit 9A.
Okay, so 9A through 9C, all 3 maps were generated within Petra, and volumetrics were calculated using the gridded algorithm for the SOPH map. These 3 maps display hydrocarbon feet with a neutron density porosity cutoff of 7%. The higher accumulations within each of these three maps are confined to the structural highs identified within the structure map. So as you can see within 9A, your confined your higher accumulations are confined towards the structural highs within the Dupro structure map, and that can be seen in 9B and 9C as well. But as far as 9A and 9C are concerned, 9A is going to be the Dupro A1 SOFIH map, and we'll later see the reserves that were calculated from this map. 9B is going to be the Dupro A2. This is going to be a SOFIH map on the Dupro A2 here. And then 9C is going to be on the Dupro C.
Okay, I don't have any other questions for the geologic witness.
Any questions from staff?
Josh, once again, bear with me just a moment while I make sure I'm on the right information. Exhibit 6, your type log. The target zones that have been identified in that exhibit, can you elaborate a little bit on why those zones have been the productive zones in the Duperow? What is it about those zones that has been identified as the reservoir?
So based upon the lithology in this reservoir, primarily it's going to be a limestone productive interval here. And with that being said, in some cases you do get some dolomitic lime as well. But however, whenever you identify these productive intervals, if there is primarily dolomite, it's going to be typically wet. And based upon what I was stating within my SOFIH maps using the cutoff value of the 7%, that was constructed based upon picket plots and other cross plots in order to identify that cutoff value, and also known as knowing that these three productive intervals was from historic production within the field.
Okay. Were any other zones identified in any of the historic wells or in your work evaluating the reservoir that might also be hydrocarbon bearing and potentially productive?
No, sir, I don't believe so. I believe the only three intervals that will be productive are the three that are highlighted.
Okay. Just
And with that being said, the Dupro A1 and C1 are going to yield stronger accumulations. The Dupro A2 seems to be more of a kind of confined based on the structure and stratigraphic outline of the field there.
so I'm just going to ask about a specific interval just because at a glance, if I look at the type log, the interval right below probably about 11,100, maybe it's 11,110, 20 or so. Similar interval or similar characteristics on the type log with low gamma, low resistivity. Looks like there's a porosity indication there as well. You recognize the interval I'm asking about?
I'm trying to, 1 second, I'm going to pull up a clear image here just so I can look at the depth track. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, it'd be right above where you've got the Dupero C called out on the type log.
You said around 11,100 there.
Yeah, I mean, between 11,100 and what you've got called out as the Dupero C on the type log.
Okay, so that's going to indicate that interval there is primarily wet. All throughout the all throughout the Dupro. Not even outside of this extent of the AOI. This interval in particular is primarily non-productive due to the amount of water that is associated with it.
Okay.
You can see there you're looking at probably maybe 6 ohms or so. So you got very low resistivity there, which typically indicates a wet reservoir.
Moving to your Exhibit 7, your structure map. I want to explore just a little bit. When you generated this map, is it purely based on well control, or were you using some seismic as well? Or there's a lot of detail here that doesn't seem supported by well control in the area.
So I used previous. At first, I mapped the Madison due to the amount of well control that was available. So after mapping the Madison, I kind of tried to mimic the structure that was found within the Madison. No seismic was interpreted. This was all based upon well control. However, I believe there was a previous operator within the field. Maybe it might have been Burlington. I can't remember who it was, so don't quote me. But I believe they did have some seismic, and they generated some maps that were based upon the seismic. However, they did have less well control, and so based upon that, I put some more thought process behind it and generated the map that we see here.
Okay, so it's a combination of a number of evaluations, but we really don't have a lot of penetration supporting that level of complexity.
Yes. So essentially, the most well control found was within the proposed unit there within the blue outline, as far as spacing is concerned, or distance between well bores. So I feel pretty confident within the Dupro unit. Now, outside of the unit, this was interpretation based upon the Madison and the depositional environment associated with it.
Okay. I'll just put on the record that we looked at the structure as well, and the well control supports a high or a structure being around the unit area, but the rest of the area around it is less supported by hard information. I'll put it that way.
And that's where the Madison structure map was incorporated primarily, and having some experience with the Madison, knowing that typically the Madison portrays these shoals, and as well as the Dupro. So that was the thought process behind it there.
Okay, I guess moving to your Exhibit 8. The cross section you provided, you went through the wells on there pretty clearly, but there's one well, the active producer, the replacement well that was drilled.
Yes.
That Bull Moose 22Y32 is not on the cross section. Is there a reason that wasn't included?
So the reason that wasn't included was due to the lack of log data that was associated with that wellbore. There were no open hole logs. They did run I forgot what kind of neutron log it was, but I believe it was a cased hole neutron log. So essentially, as far as what the log is going to be portraying, it's not going to give you an accurate depiction of what the reservoir looks like. So in that instance, I included the original wellbore, which was the 22F or 2232F there, and that wellbore essentially is only a couple hundred feet away, and pretty much has an accurate portrayal of what that other wellbore should look like within the subsurface.
Okay. I guess.
But with that,
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, with that being said, we have proven the reserves are there based upon our previous perforation of the Dupro in that well.
So that wellbore that is actively producing right now. I believe it's file number 19765, the Bull Moose 22Y32. Is that perforated in all three zones, or is it just perforated in the A1 and C1?
It is perforated in all three zones.
I'm not 100% sure that our records for the well in that situation cover that the A2 has been perforated in there, so we might want something filed in that well to confirm that. I'll double check that though. That's not necessarily part of this hearing.
And Dre might be able to further explain that. I believe the Dupro A2 is open in this well bore. I know the C1 and the A1 are for sure open.
Yeah,
And, from what I found, though, the Dupro A2 was originally perforated as well with the C1. The original perforation of the Dupro A2 and C1 was done in 2011, and then in 2022, the Dupro A1 was added.
you said 2022 the A2 was done?
The A1
Okay.
in 2011, both the A2 and the C1 were perforated from Nine Oaks.
Okay, we'll have to double check the records in that well to make sure we have everything clear.
Okay. And I'll, Drake can elaborate on that as well. He knows operations better than I do. Very smart engineer.
I might save one additional question on the perforated intervals to his testimony then. So you indicated when you were talking about exhibits 9, A, B, and C, that the netting down of those maps was based on a 7% porosity cutoff. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And so being as their SOFH maps, are you evaluating those as 100% oil saturated, or are you using the oil saturation or water saturation values from the reservoir values?
I'm using the water saturation values.
Okay, so
There was no cutoff. There was no cutoff used for the water saturation values in order to identify, the wet wells outside of the area.
okay, so in this map, if I do volumetrics based on your 9A map, I would use the 9A water saturation, oil saturation ratio against this thickness, and the something between 7 and I think it's 16% porosity.
Yeah. So within I don't know what software you'll be using to map these, but within Petra, they grid the surface. They grid the surface within the confined outline of zero contour there, and like we'll see in 13A, Exhibit 13A, I have provided your generic calculation of oil in place based upon the equation that is situated with it, and then from the compared to the gridded oil in place calculations from Petra, you can see the difference due to how Petra actually doing a more precise evaluation of the map rather than more of a broader outlook, primarily just the equation, and only I guess it would be more of a confined value that is associated with that interval.
Okay. So, Exhibit 10,
That's not his exhibit.
average net thicknesses on there.
Oh, okay, that's fine. I just wanted you to know that we haven't discussed it yet.
Sorry, I'm jumping ahead, but I think I want him to answer something here.
Oh, go ahead.
So the average net thickness that was provided for the A1, A2, and C1 on this exhibit, did that come from you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How were those numbers arrived at?
So those numbers were from all the well bores within the unit itself, or the proposed unit itself. I believe it was 5 or 6 well bores. From those 6 well bores, I took an average based upon the neutron density cutoff of 7% and got the net thickness and averaged those well bores based upon the net thickness using that cutoff.
Okay, so that's well bore based with your net down percentage included. Not, those numbers aren't based on your exhibit 9, the SOPH maps.
No, so essentially these were derived from just the well control.
Oh, well bore, okay. I wasn't able to come up with the same numbers using anything off of the maps, so I was needed to confirm where those numbers would come from.
Yes, sorry for that.
One, I guess, final question, I think probably for you, possibly for Dre, sorry. And I'm going to reference the unit agreement, Article 14, or sorry, page 14, Article 12.2 has a prohibition, a prohibition against dual completions. Anything outside of the Duperow can't be included in the unit. I'm just asking you to confirm that none of the wells are currently completed or producing out of any other zones.
I'll let Trey answer that, but I believe it is only the Duperow.
Okay, I'll follow up with him then.
I know out of those 3 wells, there is a well bore, the 115, that does, I believe, produce from Madison. But yeah, I'll let Trey answer that.
I think the rest I've got is for Dre. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Why don't we take a 10-minute break at this point?
Okay, sounds good.
we are back on the record. And we will resume with the third witness, Mr. Parr.
Yes,
Do you solemnly swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury, the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
Dre, state your name for the record, please.
Dre Parr,
And Dre, by whom are you employed?
Cobra Oil and Gas Corporation,
What capacity?
petroleum engineer, asset manager over the western half of the state.
And you've testified for the commission previously?
Yes,
And you've had your qualifications accepted as that of an expert?
I did.
Offer the further testimony of this witness, that of an expert.
Motion granted.
Dre, let's go to the next exhibit in the packet, Exhibit 10. And as the previous witnesses have done, I'd like you to identify the exhibit and then briefly discuss what's contained upon it. And perhaps you can, somewhere during your testimony of this exhibit, discuss the supplemental Exhibit 10.
Yes, so Exhibit 10 is just an overview of the Dupro unit area, the Bull Moose Field. The only unit of change is the 479.754 acres to 480 acres in the supplemental Exhibit 10.
Okay,
Going through the field parameters, the field was discovered in 1978 by drilling Devco 115 Bull Moose. Drilled to the Dupro unit. Average depth is 10,945 feet to 11,245 feet. The oil water contact is at 9,140 feet subsea. Trapping mechanism is structural stratigraphic with a water drive for primary depletion. The unit area of interest is 480 acres with the average net thickness of the A1 at 5.3 feet, the A2 at 3.3 feet, and the C1 at 5.6 feet. The original oil place that's derived from the SOPH maps is 5.43 million barrels of oil. The average porosity across the field at 16%, and average permeability at 17 millidarcies. The water saturation is 38%, and then the initial formation pressure is at 4,310 psi, with the average formation temp of 270 degrees. Current production rate out of 2 wells is 50 barrels of oil, 109 barrels of water. The current pattern spacing and future development pattern spacing that there would be linear. Cumulative production to date as of August 2024 is 1.33 million barrels of oil, which is approximately 24.5% recovery, and cumulative production is 1.17 million barrels of oil. Estimated remaining primary oil current economic projections is 145,720 barrels, which is about 2.5% of remaining primary oil. So ultimate primary oil production is estimated at 1.47 million barrels of oil, which is 27% of primary oil in place.
okay, let's go to the next exhibit, Exhibit 11.
So Exhibit 11 is a PhD wind production map of the Bull Moose 115. On the bottom left will show the projected oil cume at 515.36 thousand barrels of oil remaining in this individual well prior to cumulation would be 75,060 barrels. Currently all field gas in the bottom right is all used for surface equipment. And going down to Exhibit 12, this is the Bull Moose 22Y32 PhD wind curve, which shows remaining oil at the bottom left is 70,660 barrels, which would give it oil EUR of 137,320 barrels. This well is also used all field gas for surface equipment.
Okay, let's go to Exhibit 13A, and once again, if there's any changes that we've noted in the supplemental exhibits, please discuss those as well, and perhaps you can explain why there's a change as well.
All right, so going to Exhibit 13A, it's a original oil in place calculations broken down as far as each tract is concerned. The parameters that were changed from 13A original and 13A supplemental has been the surface acres on track 1, 2, and 4, which has also changed the original in place for well control averages on track 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 4, as well. So going to supplemental, exhibit 13A, in track 1, it will give us 143.10 surface acres, which will give us original oil in place at 1.358 million barrels. The far right column is derived from Josh's pH maps, and the original oil in place from well control averages is based off the surface acres and the formula up top. So track 2 has surface acres of 11.04 acres, which gives 64,900 original oil in place from well control and 26,070 barrels from SOPH maps. Track 3 has 160 surface acres, which will give us 1.376 million barrels of original oil in place from well control and 1.715 million barrels from SOPH maps. Track 4 has 5.86 acres, which will give us 19,212 barrels from original oil in place with well control and 4,300 barrels from SOPH maps. And track 5 has 160 acres, which will give us 1.367 million barrels of original oil in place and 1.657 million barrels from our SOPH maps. So going down on Exhibit 13A, cume production, as mentioned before, is 1.33 million barrels of oil. Recovery is 24.5%. Remaining primary to abandonment is 145,000 barrels of oil, which will give us ultimate primary to abandonment of 1.475 million barrels at 27% recovery. Incremental secondary production would be 335,840 barrels, would be 6.2% of secondary original oil in place. So with primary and secondary recovery would be 1.811 million barrels of oil at 33%. And then our economic projections will run off of $65 flat or $65 strip, operating costs of $383,920 per year, capital investment of converting the Bull Moose 1123 to a water injection well, and laying transfer lines of $600,000, which will give us a PV10 of the Bull Moose Dupro unit of $5.618 million.
Okay, Andre,
Then
let's,
going down,
oh, I'm sorry, what?
going down to 13B
Okay,
is how we derive our track participation factor. Phase 1 and Phase 2 on the original. The main differences are the change in surface acre tracks, which changed our formula on track 1, 2, and 4. So going down to the supplemental Exhibit 13B, track 1 will have 143.1 surface acres, and we allocated 26 barrels of production to track 1, which and 63,197 barrels of remaining reserves, and 438,289 production barrels, which will give us a 0.42195 track factor. Track 2 will be 11.04 surface acres, allocated 2 barrels of production, allocated 4,875 barrels of oil for remaining reserves, and 33,813 barrels of cumulative production, which will give us a track factor of 0.032509. Track 3 will have 160 surface acres, average daily production of 27 barrels a day, remaining reserves of 75,060 barrels, cume production of 512,010 barrels, which gives us a track factor of 0.470719. Track 4 allocated 5.86 surface acres, allocated 1 barrel daily production a day, 2,588 barrels of remaining reserves, 17,948 barrels of cume production, which gives us a track factor of 0.016817. Track 5 has 160 surface acres, 0 barrels of daily production allocated, 0 barrels of remaining reserves allocated, 328,200 barrels of cume production, will give us a track factor of 0.058005. The summary is 480 surface acres, 56 barrels daily production, 145,720 barrels remaining reserves, 1.33 million cume production, track factor 100%. Track factor gestation in phase 2 was broken down off of our surface acres in track 1 of 143.1 acres, 2.024 million barrels of original oil in place, 501,486 barrels of EUR, ultimate primary, and then the track factor of 0.350553. Track 2, 11.04 surface acres, 26,070 original oil in place, 38,688 estimated primary production, gets track factor of 0.016256. Track 3, 160 surface acres, 1.715 million barrels of original oil in place, 587,000 barrels of ultimate primary production, track factor of 0.354518. Track 4, 5.86 surface acres, 4,300 original oil in place, 20,536 barrels of ultimate primary, gets track factor of 0.007838. And track 5, 160 surface acres, 1.657 million barrels of oil in place, 328,000 barrels of ultimate primary, gets track factor of 0.270834. Summary is 480 surface acres, 5.428 million barrels of original oil in place, 1.47 million barrels of ultimate primary, 100% track factor.
Okay, Dre, let's go back then to Exhibit 14.
So Exhibit 14 is a cume curve of Bull Moose 115 and Bull Moose 22Y32 production curve on the bottom left. You will show that the oil remaining in place is 145,720 barrels under current economic conditions. And the gas on the bottom right will be all used field gas. Going down to Exhibit 15 is a PhD win projection of 2 years, or let me just start, of the Bull Moose 115 and 22Y32 after unitization with a 4-year fill-up period, a 4-year flat production, and then remaining decline into the economic life of the project, which will give us an oil remaining of 481,000.55 barrels. And then going down to Exhibit 16 is a PhD win projection of the field after unitization with all wells and projects rolled up, which shows a PV10 of $5.618 million. And then scrolling down underneath Exhibit 16 is the individual cases of the Bull Moose 1123, which is the capital project of $600,000 for the conversion, and then the Bull Moose 115, and then the Bull Moose 22Y32.
Okay, 17.
And then 17 is the proposed Bull Moose Dupro unit, which is a locator map showing the Bull Moose 115 in section 15, the Bull Moose 22Y32 producer in section 22, and then the Bull Moose 1123 injector in section 23.
And then the last exhibit,
And then
Exhibit 18.
exhibit 18 is just the AFE to convert the 1123 to a water injection well and run lines from the 22Y32 and 115 to the 1123.
So, Dre, some statutory questions I'd like to ask you. In your opinion, is the unitized management, operation, and further development of the proposed Bull Moose Dupro unit reasonably necessary in order to effectively carry on secondary recovery operations that you've proposed?
Yes.
And in your opinion, is the proposed unitization of the Bull Moose Dupro unit feasible? Will it prevent waste and will it with reasonable probability result in the increased recovery of substantially more oil and gas from the proposed unit area than would otherwise be recovered?
Yes.
And in your opinion, is the estimated additional cost of conducting unit operations for the proposed Bull Moose Duperow unit less than the value of the additional oil and gas that will be recovered?
Yes.
And in your opinion, is the proposed unitization of the Bull Moose Duperow unit for the common good, and will it result in the general advantage of all owners of the oil and gas rights within the proposed unit area?
Yes.
Mr. Examiner, no further questions of this witness. We'd offer our exhibits.
Exhibits are admitted. Any questions from the staff?
Dre, gonna bounce around just a little bit on you here, but to get you situated, I want to look at the unit agreement, page 7, Article 12, which is your participation, allocation, and production, and your 13A and B exhibits, and make sure we're on the same page with some of what's here. So the first participation factor in phase 1 in the unit agreement is based on the projected remaining primary reserves as of September 1, 24, the ratio of that. Looking at so I guess the first question is, how is that projected remaining primary reserves done? And I think you've touched on some of it, but I would like you to confirm that is the remaining reserves as depicted on your 13B.
So the remaining reserves were calculated off PhD wind, running under current economic conditions. So once the individual wells reached economic abandonment status, that's when the reserves ended the life of it.
So that was based on decline curves for those wells?
Correct.
Okay. The only 2 decline curves that you included in the exhibit package are, I can flip the right way. Oh, they're in here.
115 and 22R32.
Right. So those 2 were included, but were there declines done on the other wells? Or all of them, those are the only 2
Those are the
active
only 2
producing
wells.
ones?
Correct.
Okay, so I guess what this boils down to is your exhibit so let me back up. The tract 5, the well on there has currently shut in. It hasn't been fully abandoned yet. Has it been plugged and abandoned?
Correct. It has not been abandoned. It is shut in.
Okay, so is that capable of producing oil?
It would produce oil, yes, but not economic.
Non-economic, so it's effectively your decision is that it is below its economic limit and there are no remaining reserves from that well.
Correct.
Okay, so that's why the 0 comes in for track 4 or 5, both of them.
Under primary production, yes. There are no more remaining reserves, yes.
So the only 2 wells that project anything for remaining reserves are the 2 active producers, one in section 15 and one in section 22.
Correct.
And the well in section 22, is that where the remaining reserves for, I gotta get the right map in front of me at the same time. For 2 and 4 would be coming from?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so then on your revised exhibit, both 2 and 4 are allocated. Yeah. So that's just a discrepancy.
So we allocated.
Okay.
Yes. So we allocated based off of a ratio on surface acres.
Okay, so you took that decline on that well in 22 and based the surface acre ratio to the 3 tracks of track 1, track 2, and track 4.
Correct.
Okay. On the phase 2, you have the first factor in there is 45% of the ratio of the estimated ultimate primary recovery from each tract to the estimated primary recovery of all tracts. That estimated ultimate primary, is that your estimated after the initiation of enhanced soil recovery? So I'm looking at 13A and your estimated incremental secondary production values. Are those included in there?
Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, but those were allocated based off a surface acres post unitization reserves remaining.
For phase 2, yes, I believe they were allocated based on the surface acres.
Okay, but I need to confirm where the starting number would have come from. Because you've got, on your 13A, you've got 2 numbers, one being ultimate primary to abandonment, and you've got estimated incremental secondary production.
Sorry.
And my assumption here is that the number being included on your 45% estimated ultimate primary recovery in the formula for phase 2 and your 45% estimated ultimate primary on exhibit 13B is that it's the total of ultimate primary to abandonment plus what your the values that you're presenting on 13A under your estimated primary plus secondary production value, that 1,811,000 value.
So the 45% estimated ultimate primary column within phase 2, the starting number derived from the ultimate primary of abandonment.
So that wouldn't include anything that the unitization, the bump that you're expected to receive from the unitization.
Yes.
Correct. The 1.475 million barrels is ultimate primary.
So that, I believe that's where the oil in place is calculated within to the equation to encompass the secondary production.
When you're doing that calculation on 13A for your ultimate primary to abandonment, for your percentage of primary to abandonment, are you basing that percentage off of the oil in place from well control numbers or the oil in place from your SOPH numbers?
The SOPH numbers.
Okay.
So all of the calculations are derived from the SOPH. The only reason the oil in place from well control averages was added was due to the BLM wanting that to be situated within this table at the time of our conversation with them. They just wanted to see 2 columns showing the oil in place from well control versus the pH maps were showing.
Okay. Dre, I asked Josh this, but unit agreement in the unit agreement 14 page 14 article 12.2, any dual completions in any of these wells at this time?
No, these are all due pro producers.
Exhibit 17. This is your unitization, I guess, or your how the unit will operate under injectivity.
Correct.
Some general questions to start out with. What's your source water going to be?
Source water is going to be produced water from the Bull Moose 115, Bull Moose 22Y32. And then we have a Madison well right by the Bull Moose 115. That will be source water, and then we'll have makeup water trucked in.
Okay, and have you done compatibility studies on, or looked at the compatibility of those fluids being injected into the Duperow?
Yes, compatibility has been done on the Madison and Dupro. They have two Bakken wells, one Burlington well, one Petronet well. I'm waiting to do a compatibility study to see if we can take their water as well.
Okay, but you wouldn't plan to take source water from any sources that you hadn't at least evaluated for compatibility with injection into the Duperow?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
All injected fluid will be compatibility study.
Okay, and this might be helpful to refer back to that cross section, but I'm going to ask specifically about zones that are perforated in the existing wells. So I asked some of these questions of Josh, but that Bull Moose 22Y32 well, can you confirm that well is currently perforated in all three zones?
So it is perforated in all three zones. It is only currently producing out of the Dupro A.
Okay.
So looking in the well file, I was just asking our tech. The water gun sundries were submitted years ago, and the updated perf interval was not updated on the NDIC website.
So we're potentially missing something in the file right now?
Everything's been submitted. So she's following up with the girl, seeing if there's some kind of technical issue.
Okay, well, that's not necessarily pertinent here. We'll follow up on that well and its records outside of this case, I guess. The injection well, or the well you propose to convert to the injection well, file number 12384 is the Bull Moose 1123 well.
Mm-hmm.
Is that well currently perforated in all three zones?
It has three. It has a Dupro. Yeah, it has three zones open.
I think you might want, I don't have everything in front of me right now, but I think you might want to look into that one. I think when we looked at that, the perforations there's two sets of perforations in the A1, it appears, but I don't know that the A2 is perforated in that well.
Yeah, it's from 116 to 119 and 126 to 129.
The Dupro A2 is not perforated in the 1123 up.
Would
I'm seeing the Dupro C1 and the Dupro A1.
yeah, that aligns with what I think we determined when we were reviewing. Would it be your intent while recompleting that well for injection operations, would you be perforating the A2 zone?
Yes. If it is not currently open, I will open up that zone. And then long term, we'll be removing the retrieval bridge plug in the 22Y32 and producing from all three intervals.
So you would ultimately have all three intervals open in all three wells, injecting into the one and producing from all three zones in the other two.
Yes.
I mean, when we talk timing, all that work gets done at the time when you're recompleting the injector? You also get to remove the other bridge plug?
I would keep producing that well as is for the time being. Do all the facility work, pipelines, transfer pumps, tanks, reperf the injection well, and then fairly shortly after, would add the purse, or remove the retriever bridge plug in the 22R32.
Okay. When you're injecting into the injection well, your anticipation is that you're injecting into all three zones and you're getting pressure support and water drive in each of the three individual zones?
Yes.
Are you anticipating any communication between the zones, or are they just connected via the porosity zone?
They should just be connected linear through porosity. I haven't seen any instances where they've been connected vertically.
Okay. The oil water contact that you presented on Exhibit 10, that oil water contact is below the C1 zone, right?
Yes. Or sorry, I was saying, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Exhibit 14. Which is your original, well, I guess your full unit decline. The drop off that you see at 38 years, what's going on with that one? Is that a well being plug?
That's when the Bull Moose 115 becomes uneconomic.
Okay, and so that drop
If
off.
you scroll, yes, if you scroll up to exhibit 11.
Yep.
So at 2036, that's 115 plug.
Okay, so your Exhibit 11, where that cuts off, is effectively the economic limit for that well,
Correct.
and you're up at 400 barrels, and that's an economic limit.
Per month, yeah. So that well has a much higher water cut than the 22R32 on top structure.
Okay, so with the water, you need a lot more oil to make that maintain an
Higher
economic.
operating.
Okay. And then following that, I guess since we're on 11, I'll jump to 12. The economic limit on that one appears to be in the 150, 130 barrels per month
Correct.
range.
Yes, not, the operating expenses are much lower on that.
Okay.
But you could anticipate in the later life of the oil, the water cut increasing and potentially killing the reserves much sooner than that is currently projected.
That, I think, covers what I had on 14. Exhibit 15, the unitization projection that you have here. What kind of increase are you anticipating, and how did you come up with what that value that you're projecting on Exhibit 15 ends up being?
So we mirrored the Bull Moose Depot unit off our North Branch Cadonian unit as far as fill-up time for initial decline and then ramping up. And so pretty much just mirrored the two units, and we got the sheet's kind of hard to pick up, but see if I'm pulling up on some software right now. So we increased production to about 70 barrels a day in a year to 70 barrels a day, which is extremely conservative. So that would start in year 28 with max peak production around 2030 with peak production around 2032, and then continuing on its current decline in a linear decline.
And so that was based off of evaluating your Devonian unit?
Correct. Yes.
That Devonian unit that you're evaluating, what's the formation being productive in that one?
The Dupro, as well as commingled with the Nisku as well, but the formation study with Dupro.
Okay, so that is also a Dupero unit. Okay.
Yes.
Similar perforated intervals, multiple zones?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's not exact. Some wells, have classification. They don't have the Dupro C, and some are just A, some are all three. But as far as the analogy, it's very similar.
Okay, I think that covers everything I had. Thank you.
Do you have any more witnesses?
No, and I think what I'll do is, because, once again, the federal government being involved, they have a sort of their own way of doing this, and what they will do next is likely issue a letter to the Industrial Commission indicating that this constitutes a logical area for unitization. We expect to get that shortly. In fact, I thought we'd have it for today. I mean, that's obviously going to happen because they had picked the area. As you recall, we cut out a quarter section. After that, they will wait for an order of the Industrial Commission establishing the unit. Of course, that isn't the final word on this. We have to get ratifications from royalty owners and working interest owners. No problem getting working interest owner ratification because of the percentage of interest that Cobra owns. But we will need the federal government to sign on, and they will do that with a separate letter of approval. So my suggestion, Mr. Examiner, is that we leave the record open on case number 31624 for us to submit those additional ratifications. And what we will do in that exhibit, in that set of exhibits, is we'll include a unit agreement, unit operating agreement that incorporate all of the changes. In fact, they are in what you have right now. And then we'll supplement it later with a summary sheet, and that summary sheet will indicate how many royalty owners have ratified and also how many working interest owners have ratified. So it's a long way of saying if we could leave the record open on that, and my anticipation will be somewhere maybe 10 days after the commission enters the order creating and establishing the unit, but not confirming that it's in full force and effect until the ratifications are received.
Any comments from staff? Okay. The record will remain open then, in this case, pending receipt of.
Yeah, and we may very well submit it earlier if we get it earlier, and then we'll just ask that the record be closed.
Okay.
One other thing, in the case or the situation where in reviewing further with the supplementals, if we identify something that does require a little bit of clarification, I'm assuming we can reach out through you and continue to get that records being left
Absolutely.
open.
And that does remind me of one thing. Wasn't there one thing that you did request between, or am I mistaken on that? I thought there was a request for something. Perhaps I'm wrong.
Yeah, the breakdown section. Did they have the federal?
But I think Mark explained it on that second.
Yeah. I'm not sure if there was or not.
Okay,
We
all
can
right.
double check.
Well,
If there's
obviously,
something needed,
if there is
we'll
something, just submit
confirm.
it to me. So.
Thank you.
That concludes our hearing for case numbers 31623, 31624. That concludes our hearings for the day.